Hello, this is Sunil Sundaraj from In the Zone. This morning, I'm honored to welcome in Kelly Burke. Kelly is a freelance color analyst, play-by-play, and sideline reporter with ESPN and ESPN Plus, covering the Missouri Valley Conference with college, volleyball, softball, track and field. She's also a podcast show host and producer, and then recently started with career coaching for entrepreneurs in business. Thank you so much, Kelly. Again, for this opportunity to interview you.
You're welcome, Sunil. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so glad we got connected through NSMA.
Yes, indeed. I wanted to ask you, we're talking off air, is that about said your passion, for sports began at a young age. If you wanted to dive into that first, Kelly.
Sure. I was born in New Hampshire, about an hour from Boston, and lived there from the age of birth till about 10 years old. So I remember my dad and my brother being, New England sports fans, Boston Red Sox, the Patriots. But to be honest with you, Sunil, back then we lived in a really small town, and there wasn't very many opportunities for girls to play sports. I remember I remember doing gymnastics in second and third grade. But other than that, there wasn't really local opportunities until fifth grade. I remember you could join the track team. So I got into running a little bit, but we moved then when I was a fifth grader, we moved to Arizona. And that's when I really fell in love with sports. It was the year that the Phoenix Suns were really good. I was with Charles Barkley, Kevin Johnson, Dan Barley, Danny Ainge, all those guys. And they went to the NBA Finals. And so we moved to Phoenix the middle of that season. And we started watching Suns games every week. We would listen, we'd watch the games on TV, but listen to Al McCoy, the radio voice. We'd turn on the radio and listen to him calling the games. And so I became this diehard Suns fan very quickly. And we'd watch all the games. And I remember during the NBA Finals, Game 6, when John Paxson hit that shot to sink the Suns, I cried. I was so upset. I had a number of years after that where honestly I despised Michael Jordan just because, he was obviously, he's legendary. He's one of the best to ever do it, maybe the best, depending on who you argue with or talk to. And he was such a large part of sinking the Suns in that series and the way that he played through it. And so it took me several years to really appreciate what his game was and who he was, and to actually like him again. And I even remember that they had a parade for the Phoenix Suns that year because they had never been to that point. And I begged my mom, can I skip school? Can I go to this parade? And she wouldn't let me skip school to go to the parade. And same thing, I cry. I was really, really upset that she wouldn't let me skip school to go to that parade. So that was kind of what started my really true love of sports. And right after that, I started playing YMCA basketball. There's a lot more opportunities for girls to play sports out in Arizona. So I started playing YMCA basketball, and then it sort of just took off from there into middle school and high school. And by high school, I was a 3-sport athlete and, was a really good athlete.
Yeah, it said you accomplished so much, in high school, and then, of course, went on to Arizona State, Kelly. It said majored in broadcast journalism. If you can talk about your time at Arizona State, especially, both on the athletic side and then, with academics, and then, especially with broadcast journalism.
I chose Arizona State. I had, I'd narrowed it down to a list of about 10 schools and got it down to 3. I was looking at Boston College, Gonzaga University, and ASU. And ASU they had everything that I wanted. I wanted to go to a top journalism school. They had that in the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. At the time, I wanted to be on a good cross country and track team because that's the sport I was going to play in college. And they had a top 15 cross country team at the time that they were building, and that was getting better and better every year. And then, to be honest with you, ASU at the time, they had something where if you were in the top 2% of your graduating class, you got essentially a full ride to to college. So I had a lot of scholarship offers. I was that person that my mom, had read some book that, there's all these scholarships out there that go unclaimed. And so I literally spent a lot of my weekends in my senior year of high school writing essays for all these scholarships. I mean, I remember applying to the Tall People Club of America. Really obscure, like, Irish scholarships, stuff like that. And so I would win all these scholarships because I got really good grades. I was a really good student, and obviously was really active in athletics and community service and different clubs at my high school. So I won a ton of scholarships. So essentially ASU, I had, some scholarship money coming from the other schools, but ASU, I was essentially going to owe nothing to go to school there. And I could still live on campus and be away from my family, enough that I felt like I was having the college experience. So I chose ASU, and I don't regret it at all. I love that school. Definitely runs in my blood. And it was just a great experience, just both the athletic and the academic side of it. The athletic side, I learned a lot about myself that I think really helped as I got into the career of broadcasting and journalism, mainly because, to be honest with you, in college, I was injured a lot. I had a hard time adjusting to the higher mileage when I got to college. And so I had a lot of stress fractures in my shins. I had a lot of seasons where maybe I would start the season and then I would get injured and I would be sidelined for the rest of the season. And that was really, really frustrating as an athlete, especially somebody that had a lot of success in high school. So I had to really develop that perseverance muscle and that sort of the relentless attitude of just overcoming a lot of adversity and challenges on the athletic stage in college that I think really helped me as I got into journalism, because as you know, it's not easy to get a job in our profession, especially out of school. So all that stuff helped for later in life. And then on the broadcasting and journalism side, I met a lot of great individuals and learned a lot, had a lot of tangible hands-on experiences at ASU that I think really prepared me for what I was going to face in my career.
Yeah. So talk about your first job, is it in the field, Kelly, at KAZ-TV and Cox 7 Sports, starting there in 2004, going up until 2005 as a sideline reporter, covering Arizona State men's and women's basketball games there.
Sure. So what happened is I graduated from college, and I was told I had a good tape. I'd done a lot of internships, and people were like, your tape's really good, you're going to get a job. And I started sending out tapes all over the country to get a job in a local TV market. And it took 13 months. And so what I was doing in the meantime is I was freelancing in Phoenix, taking any job I could in any way related to sports. So I was doing a lot of production jobs for these networks that would come to town for professional sports. And, I'd work as a production assistant or a runner, whatever they needed, I would do. And then I had done an internship at Cox Sports. And so they had hired me as a freelancer to report for this high school sports show that they did locally. And then I do production work for them too. And then same thing, I'd made a contact at AZ-TV. And so they needed a sideline reporter for the ASU women, mainly the women's basketball, but they did a couple of men's basketball games. So I just, I said yes to everything I could. And the funny part about the AZ-TV job is, and I don't remember if I told this story on the webinar we were on, but I literally had this moment a couple of games into the season where I didn't know what I was doing, first of all. Nobody had ever trained me what you need to do as a sideline reporter, what the process is, what it looks like to prepare, any of that stuff. So I literally had no idea what I was doing. And I was working with two guys that were absolute legends in broadcasting in Arizona. And so when you're a sideline reporter, you do what we call an opening hit. And so they tossed it over to me for my opening hit a couple games into the season. And I got about 2 sentences in and I forgot what I was talking about. And we're on live TV, so you can imagine 22-year-old me, deer in headlights, the red light's on, and I'm frozen, and I can't get anything out of my mouth. And I'm thinking in my head, what was I just saying? And I literally cannot remember. And I'm racking my brain, and it felt like it was 15 minutes that I was standing there. It was probably at 15 seconds, but it felt like a really long time. And I couldn't for the life of me remember. And so all I said is, back to you. And my producer got in my ear, my little IFB right away, and it said, what he said some choice words, but like, what happened essentially. And I told him I forgot what I was talking about. And so after the game, I was a mess. I was devastated. I'm thinking, I just ruined my career and it hasn't even started. And I went up to him and, he asked again, what happened? And I said, Stu, I forgot what I was talking about. And he said, don't you have a reporter's notebook? Don't you have notes written down? I said, no, am I supposed to? He goes, yes, you're supposed to carry a reporter's notebook and have bullet points written down about what you're going to say on your hits, so that if you forget what you're talking about, like you did, you can glance down at your reporter's notebook and you can jog your memory. And so I said, okay, well, great. I'll remember that for next game. So guess who came with a reporter's notebook the next game and started writing down bullet points? But again, nobody had ever taught me what you're supposed to do. Yeah. So it's just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. So that was a really defining moment for me, because I think, I could have just packed up the tent and been like, my career's over and I can't do this. Because I essentially fell on my face on live TV, in the Phoenix market. And thank God the game was on a local cable station. So it's not like it had a lot of viewers, but it was really, really embarrassing. And I just realized, that I had to really do my due diligence with stuff and really seek out, when I didn't know something, I had to seek out help from other people and not be afraid to ask for help for stuff I didn't know, or even the process. So, I did that, for that season. And then finally, after 13 months, I'd been going to the post office every day with 5 or 6 priority mail boxes to send out to stations with my reel in it. And finally, after 13 months, I got the call saying that an ABC station in Medford, Oregon, a small market, wanted to hire me as the weekend sports anchor. So that was sort of the full-time TV job that started my career. But all the stuff I did in Phoenix was so pivotal, because I got to see not only in front of the camera a little bit, but mainly behind the camera, and all the stuff that goes in and how important all the positions are. And it also really taught me just how to treat people, because, I saw, because I was working as a production assistant, I saw sometimes how big time talent, some people would treat everybody really well, but then I also saw a couple people in here and there that, maybe they would treat the main producer well, but then when it came to the production assistant or the janitor, whoever, they treated them like crap. And I thought, I'm not going to be one of these people whenever I become successful. I'm going to treat everybody the same and treat everybody really well.
I hate to ask you, moving from Arizona to Oregon, just if you could talk about that, Kelly. It said moving, a couple of states away or several states away, and then just how that transition was, for you.
It was interesting, because I've always been one of those people, Sunil, that I haven't been ever afraid of change. I'm one of those people, I really embrace change. And so Oregon, though, I had never been to Oregon in my life when I accepted that job. So I essentially accepted that job sight unseen. And it was a drastic change, just because I lived in Arizona, really warm, totally different desert climate. And then I moved to Oregon, and literally the weekend I moved there was in the middle of, it was the beginning of January. And when we were driving my car up there, it was the middle of a snowstorm, and it happened to be a really rainy period in Southern Oregon. They were having like flash flooding. And so the first entire week I was there, they had massive amounts of flooding, and it rained every day. And I'm thinking, what did I get myself into up here, just weather-wise? But it was one of the best experiences of my career, my life. I loved living in Oregon. I think for me, if it would have been a bigger TV market, I probably would have stayed there, just because I loved the area so much, and I love the people and the culture. It's just, Oregon in general is such an incredibly scenic state. Mm-hmm. So it was good, because it really just reinforced my independence, and just the need to be able to adjust to different situations and to really lean into change. And that's been pivotal throughout my career, just because I've lived all over. And if you know, at least it's changed a little bit now as far as how people climb, no matter if you're in TV or radio or newspaper. But how it used to be when I graduated, at least, is that if you wanted to be on air, you had to go to a small TV market and then go to a medium market and a large market, and you just worked your way up. And now there's so many opportunities in sports digitally and social media and all sorts of things, that's not necessarily the path that people have to take anymore. You know, individual professional teams hire reporters now. So there's a lot of different avenues to get in, but back then that was how you had to go about doing it. So if you wanted to make it in the industry, you had to be willing to move to Pocatello, Idaho, or Yuma, Arizona, or these small towns that you've never heard of, because that was just part of paying your dues.
Yeah. You know, I jotted this down, Kelly, in my notes, is that about multitasking, wearing many hats. I mean, you were an anchor, you produced, you were shooting, editing sportscast. I mean, you did it all. I mean, you know, said as far as co-anchoring, you know, said for Friday Night Football, basketball shows, posting sports web content, writing a weekly blog. So, you know, really diversifying yourself and just like, you know, again, being able to spread your talent, your workout. Can you just speak to that, Kelly?
Sure. You know, it's interesting because it sounds in a way like I was ahead of my time, just because now we really hammer how important the versatility is. But it was just, you had to, when you worked in, especially when you worked in those small markets, they expected you to do everything. So you were shooting your own stuff, you were editing your own stuff, you were producing your own sportscasts. I was in a 2-person sports department. So it was myself and the sports director that I worked with. And so we did everything. So if you didn't learn how to do that stuff, it didn't get done. So it was a lot of work. I worked a lot of hours. But again, I think it helped make me more well-rounded, and it helped me really appreciate those rare times in my career where maybe every now and then they'd send me out with a photographer. And it was almost like a luxury then when you would have somebody like that, or even now when I work, higher level games where there's a huge production crew, like it makes you really appreciate all the people and all the nuances that go into it. Because I remember what it was like in Medford, Oregon, when, you know, you have a bare bones crew on the weekend news, and I'm in the middle of doing my sportscast and the teleprompter operator falls asleep. And so all of a sudden my sportscast on the teleprompter is just standing there, and I'm literally having to improvise, trying to figure out, okay, what's next, you know, my script, or maybe the wrong video is playing on TV. And those are just things because, like myself, it's a lot of people that are in their first jobs. And so you're going to make mistakes. And it's like, how do you handle those mistakes? And how do you learn to do all this stuff and work the long hours? But I think ultimately what it comes down to, and it's interesting because I was talking to a college class yesterday via Zoom, giving them advice. And one of the things I told them is, somebody asked me a question about, you know, essentially why should we envy your career or your life? And I was like, you shouldn't envy my career or life at all. Like, nobody should envy someone else. You know, ultimately it's about, are you happy? And for me, I was willing to make all the sacrifices that you have to do in this profession, especially when you're young, and in those first jobs, you know, missing a lot of friends' weddings, working on Christmas, working on Thanksgiving, working the holidays, working weekends all the time, because I genuinely wanted to work in sports, and I lived for what I was doing every day. So making $9 an hour in Medford, Oregon, because that's what I was making, you know, which up there was like a poverty wage because the cost of living is high. But I was willing to do all those things and make those sacrifices because I wanted to be in the industry so bad. And I didn't want to work a 9-to-5 job in the bank.
Yeah, because, you know, with sports, you know, you know it well, it isn't a 9-to-5 job. I mean, they're all crazy hours, and like, you know, you're working, you know, practically 7 days, 365.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same way,
Yeah,
it's the same way now.
yeah,
Even 15 years into the industry, I'm
yeah,
still working on the weekends. Of course I'm working on the weekends. That's when half the
yeah,
sports happen.
yeah,
I'm still working some holidays. I can pick and choose my schedule a little more, but
yeah,
if it's a big game or if it's something I want to work, I'm going to work
yeah.
it.
Oh yeah,
And you have your days where you're working 14 or 15 hours that day because you have a big
yeah,
game and you have to travel and go to shoot arounds and all sorts of stuff. But at the same time, we might all work long hours, but for me, it doesn't feel like I'm working because I love the process even that goes into it all. I love doing the research. I love breaking down film. Like it's not just like the red light comes on and we go live for a game and I love
hmm,
that specific area. I
yeah,
do love the challenge of that. I love everything leading up to that goes into it
yeah.
too.
That's what I was going to ask you, is the preparation. That you're right. You just don't go on site and cover a game, and then even if you're a sports anchor, you have to show up, several hours beforehand, and then even the days and the week leading up to that. I mean, that goes into it as well, Kelly.
Absolutely. No, preparation is the biggest thing for me. Just helping me feel confident is I like to be over prepared always because you just never know what you're going to encounter, especially during a live game and what information you're going to have to rely on. So there's times I'll start preparing for games a week out if I have the time. Definitely multiple days out for sure, just because I want to feel like I've exhausted every avenue that I've talked to everybody, whether it's a coach or athlete or SID, everybody related to the game I'm about to do, just so that I feel like I'm the most prepared person there and that I have angles on stuff that I'm about to broadcast that nobody knows, because ultimately it's my responsibility as a broadcaster. Yes, the average fan, they can pick up a newspaper and read, the local reports on it. But as the broadcaster, I better have insights into that game and into that team that isn't out there necessarily in the public domain. Like that's why they're tuning in, is to listen to somebody like me who's an expert on that team or an expert on that sport break it down. So I
Hmm.
feel like it's really my responsibility. And if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it 110%. Like why,
Yeah,
why I'm not going to broadcast the game and not put in all the work to do it well. It's my livelihood. It's what I love to do. And I live for the process of it, and the research part of it just as much as the actual game.
yeah. I want, before I ask you about moving to Illinois, is that I was reading that they did win an award, I said at the TV station there in Medford. Is that correct? Was there an award for AP?
Probably.
Yeah, sports report. I want to quickly
Yeah.
ask you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there was, to be honest.
Okay.
I know that our news director used to enter us into different awards contests, and I remember winning a couple awards at each station. I'm not sure that I could tell you exactly what year it
Okay.
was or
Yeah. All
what
right.
they were,
Yeah.
but
No, I said I know you won awards. Even at the station you in Illinois. I think it was at WSIL TV. But if you can talk about there, said again. Being a co-anchor, I think, and then adding Friday night football and basketball, then also at I think it was Southern Illinois University, it said as well. And it said you basically were covering everything there as well, Kelly.
I was, yeah. I think I was even busier in that second job, the second TV job as a sportscaster in Southern Illinois, because we had a bigger coverage area. And so we really covered high school sports a ton. And we had those Friday night football and basketball shows. But then we also had Southern Illinois University, SIU, that was close by. That was one of the colleges close by. That was the college we probably covered the most. And so I would always cover them on Saturdays for football games or whenever they'd have basketball games. And we actually did coaches shows for that school as well. So we had to essentially on Saturday nights, I would, I'd come into work on a Saturday anywhere from 10 a.m. to noon, depending on what I had to cover, go out and cover stuff. Then I'd anchor the 6 o'clock newscast. And then there was always it was a 10 o'clock newscast. I'd anchor the sports for that. And we'd have like an extended sports show that night at 10:30. And then I'd get off the set, and then we had to turn around a coach's show for the next morning. So I remember being at work a lot of times till, I don't know, 2 a.m., 1 a.m., 3 a.m., depending on what package, what story I had to produce and put together for that coach's show, or what I had to edit for that coach's show. And then I also, while I was in that market, started just on the side doing games, freelancing. SIU and the Missouri Valley Conference at the time had signed a contract with ESPN and ESPN3 to start broadcasting more games. And so they needed specifically a color analyst to do some basketball games and some volleyball games. So I started doing those on my off days, so to say, at the TV station. So that kind of opened up that area for me, but it was busy. I mean, being a local TV sportscaster there, we really covered so many local teams, and people in that market lived for sports. So we were incredibly busy. I was working really long hours, but it was a good experience again, because I was shooting my own stuff, editing everything, producing it. It just goes back to, like, you got to be able to do everything. And you don't sort of reach this point in your career where you've arrived and you can just say, oh, I'm only going to focus on this one area.
I know. I really am so impressed because I read that even, golf, women's sports fitness. I mean, it said being able to really, again, expand your horizons. It said, nothing was untouchable. I mean, you basically, ventured into every category of sports here, Kelly.
Yeah, it's funny. I have this really creative side of me. And so we did a little bit of a golf segment when I worked in Oregon. And so I pitched a golf segment to my sports director and then our news director. And at first they were like, I don't know about this, but I had become friends with the golf coach at SIU, and she had retired. And so she had a great personality, and I knew we could do sort of a similar format to what we did when I was in Oregon. So essentially, for a couple of years, we did this Tee to Green segment where Diane, who was the former collegiate golf coach, would teach me golf lessons on air, like a 2 to 3 minute segment, her teaching, chipping or, putting or whatever aspect, how to hit a draw, how to hit a fade. And we had a lot of fun. I mean, she had a great personality. We would laugh. I'd make mistakes, but people got to see me get better at golf, this person that was not very good at golf, and I got better at golf. And so I think people can relate to that in a lot of ways, just because the game of golf is really hard for most people, at least. And so it was just doing creative segments like that. There was an amateur athlete segment that we did every week. And I'm like you, I'm a storyteller at heart, and I like to tell stories, and I like to entertain people. And so I was trying to think of out of the box ways that people who aren't even interested in sports, that, don't consider themselves sports fans, would want to tune in and want to watch what we were putting out.
Mm-hmm. As I said, I mentioned in the intro that, you've also switched to a different format as, a podcast show, a host and producer. I mean, it's entirely different from, of course, being, an anchor, a news anchor, sports anchor, said color analyst, play-by-play. If you can just, talk about, said being able to, go into that, said line of work, Kelly.
So I have 3 podcasts that I host now, but I started the first one, gosh, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And it was kind of when podcasting wasn't really that big of a thing yet. And I saw this opportunity with the Missouri Valley Football Conference for people, it's not like it has a rabid fan base like in Alabama out there, but it is a very niche audience. And I thought there's an opportunity here to really go a lot deeper and more in depth on some of these coaches and these teams and people associated with the sport. So I pitched it to the conference, Missouri Valley Football Conference, and they liked it. And so I started hosting, at the time, I think it was a monthly podcast. And that's continued, since that, 4 or 5 years ago, college football podcast. And it, we do more episodes certain times of the year when we're in season, but it's a year-round thing. And so it was a really great opportunity to improve my interviewing skills and to really get to know the people associated with the league. And then actually during COVID is when 2 other podcasts started. So the Missouri Valley Conference, when all this stuff happened with George Floyd's murder, you know, the Valley was really great about making race and social justice issues a big priority. And they started this initiative. And as part of that initiative, they wanted me to, you know, interview in roundtables different people just about their experiences, people of all different backgrounds, whether it's, you know, a Black coach or a white athletic director, a student athlete. You know, it just depends on, we do at least one per month. The one I just did a couple weeks ago was on voting, but essentially we started this podcast series called Mobilizing Voices for Change. And so I'm just the host of it. Really the meat of it and the best stuff is the people that we bring on as guests to be able to talk about their experiences and what they're going through and what they've lived through. And then in June, I had always wanted to start a women in sports media podcast. There wasn't really anything like that out there. I mean, I listened to Richard Deitch's podcast, his sports media podcast, and love that. But there wasn't anything specifically just about women. And I think there's a lot of women out there who their stories haven't been told, and they have really fascinating journeys in this industry. So I thought, I would really love to do this. And I just hadn't had the time for the last couple of years to start something like that. Then COVID hit. And, you know, all my games got shelved, obviously, because I was in the live sports world. And so I had time to really flush out the idea. And so I flushed it out, and I started recording interviews and started the podcast the end of June, beginning of July. And so it's called Voices and Visionaries, the Female Forces in Sports Media. And it's been really fun. You know, it's a passion project for me. It's literally that, you know, I'm not getting paid for it or anything, but it's just a way for me to network, to get to know other women in the industry better. Some of the people are personal friends. Other people are just people I want to get to know better and want to be able to tell their stories. But it's been really, you know, I had Leslie Visser on recently. Andrea Kramer's been on. I mean, there's just been, you know, and I try and get a very diverse voices and backgrounds because I think it's important to show all aspects of the industry and just different struggles that different people have had. So I've been doing that. It's been coming out every Wednesday, and it's been really fun, to be honest. You know, like I love doing the interviews for it. I'm learning a lot. It's a great way to network, and I love being able to promote other people in our industry and what they're doing.
Yeah, a couple of things just like popped into my head about that is that, you know, with, you know, I was going to ask you a little bit later, but might as well ask you now, like, you know, who you looked up to. You know, I said, as far as like, you know, that you wanted to be in this profession, and, you know, also even going back to when you were in Illinois, how you use social media to promote stories online as well, Kelly. But if you want to just talk about, like, you know, maybe someone, you know, that you definitely looked up to, you know, as you were entering, you know, this field of broadcast journalism.
So growing up, I can remember watching Hannah Storm when she worked for NBC Sports, when her and Bob Costas were on the NBC Sports team together. And I remember them, you know, they had the NBA package. So she was probably the person I looked up to most, and I wanted to be her. It didn't necessarily register that I could be her, but it definitely piqued my interest in going into sports. And what was neat is when I was in college, my junior year into senior year summer, I was part of this IRTS, International Radio Television Society Fellowship Program in New York City. And so they choose 30 people from around the country to do these summer internships and fellowships, all different backgrounds. And I knew I wanted to go into sports, but I wanted to be sure I didn't want to do a morning talk show or morning news show. So I asked to intern at a network morning show. And it just so happened that at the time, Hannah had gotten out of doing sports, and she was working as the morning anchor for the early show on CBS. And so what was neat is when I found out I was going to do an internship at the early show, I wrote her a letter and explained, you know, I grew up watching you, and I like you're my idol, and I want to, want to do what you did in sports and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm going to be interning at the early show this summer. And what happened is at the end of my internship, because I was only in the studio about 1 day a week. The other times I was at like the CBS regular broadcast center. And her assistant reached out to me and said, Hannah wants to meet with you. So she sat down with me for an hour one day after the broadcast, and just let me pick her brain. And I had some of the same goals that she had when she was my age. So that was a really defining moment early on, just getting to meet somebody that you idolize. But there's been a lot of people, honestly, over the years. Anne Ligori, who people in the New York, New Jersey area are probably familiar with. She was one of the first women at WFAN, the first technically to host their own sports call and talk show. Anne and I got connected that same summer when I was doing that fellowship. And so she's been my mentor ever since. And, she's been really crucial, especially now that I've moved into the freelance side of things, because she's really gone about things totally different with her career, as far as she owns all her own content. She runs her own companies. She never was necessarily full-time with other networks, so to say. So she sort of built this empire, but she owns everything. And it made me think about sports and what I'm doing more from a business side, which has been really eye-opening. And then I've gotten to know Leslie over the last couple of years, and she's just this amazing person with incredible stories. Just a huge champion of women, one of the biggest cheerleaders you'll ever meet. I haven't met Doris Burke, but obviously people, she's the GOAT. Like, she's really, really good at her job. And as somebody that, works in the analyst role a lot, she's somebody that I really admire a lot and think she does an incredible job.
Sometimes I was going to ask you, you've been now in the business, 15 years?
Yeah, about 15 years.
Sometimes you have to just sit there and say, wow, here I've been able to accomplish this much. And, I'm, definitely making a name for myself, but just to see where you started and where you are, I had to ask you that. I just, something that, again, popped up, if you wanted to talk about that, Kelly.
What's interesting is I've obviously made a lot of strides from where I started in my career, just trying to get that first job, but
yeah,
I don't feel that successful, which may sound weird, but I feel like there's so many more levels that I need to get to.
Yeah.
I've worked a couple network level games, but I'm not at that level full time, and that's what I'm aspiring to do, is to be doing network level games all the time. So I just feel like I still have so much to accomplish, and I'm just still so hungry. And I'm one of those people, I think there was a period, to be honest with you, in the middle of my career when I was in Illinois, where I felt like I got really comfortable for a couple of years. I'd met my now husband. We were dating at the time, and I liked the what I was doing for a job, and I liked everything. I knew all the coaches, and everything was just really comfortable. And I think there was a couple of years there where I sort of let my foot off the gas, where I wasn't really being deliberate about getting better every day. And so what I've realized in this industry is, you constantly have to be getting better. You constantly have to be learning, seeking out feedback from other people that are better than you, because that's the only way you're going to continue to break through in our profession. There's so many talented people doing what we do. I mean, there's so many people entering the profession every day that are young people that are really, really good and know stuff, social media wise, that you and I don't know necessarily. And so I just think you constantly have to be learning. And I would say I'm honestly, now I think I'm as motivated as I was starting off in this industry. It maybe looks different just because some of my priorities just with family and different things are different. But I still have a huge passion for this industry, and I don't believe in resting on your past success and laurels, because at some point it's going to blow up in your face, and it's like, what are you doing now? What are you doing in the present?
That's true. I was a couple of questions I was going to ask you. First, for aspiring journalists, especially, women in sports. It's something that I've done, said the past couple of years, with the series Women in Sports Media. But what, your advice would be, I know you touched on a couple of points, but, really what, especially in this day and age, again, with social media, said what, you would, offer in terms of advice, again, to younger journalists as well.
Yeah. So if I was speaking directly to women, I think the one thing I would say is just get outside the box in what you think you can do. I think I have a lot of young women that come to me and say, I want to be a sideline reporter, which is great. I think that's a great goal. Being a sideline reporter is hard. It's a much harder role than it looks. But I always encourage them to, okay, that's great, but you should try out being an analyst, and you should try being a play-by-play, because you're going to have way more. There's only so many opportunities for a sideline reporter in a broadcast, and just especially right now, COVID, like a lot of sideline reporters aren't being used. So if you only want to be a sideline reporter, you're really limiting the job opportunities you're going to potentially have, especially entry level. There's just not a lot of jobs entry level that are sideline reporters. There's only so many sideline reporters on like the highest level games at ESPN even. So that's why you need to be able to do other roles. And I think in the past, like when I was coming up, I mean, female play-by-plays and analysts it didn't really exist. It wasn't a thing. But now there's a lot of women. We're seeing more and more women do it, and do it at a high level. Somebody like a Doris Burke, a LaChina Robinson. And so I think as a woman, if you can see it, you can be it thing. And so now young girls and young broadcasters, they can see other women doing it. And so I think that's huge. Just as far as advice for just young broadcasters in general, or young journalism students in general, I would just encourage people, especially right now in COVID, when the job environment is so tough, like start, use your creativity, start putting out content now, whether it's on video, or whether you're writing a blog or writing articles. But there's no reason. There's so many mediums out there with YouTube and all these social media channels. You can start your own website. And the more you can be doing, even when you're in school, the better off you're going to be, because it goes back to that whole versatility thing. How are you going to set yourself apart from the other person that's 22 out there? And so if you're putting this unique content out, and you're figuring out how to use your voice, whatever that looks like at that age, you're going to be a leg up on everybody else trying to get a job.
Yeah. Just have a couple more, Kelly. I wanted to ask you about ESPN. I mean, they're all, the worldwide leader in sports. They've been around for, I said, over 40 years. I mean, when you think about, said being able to cover games, said for ESPN, said, do play. What does that mean to you personally, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm obviously, like I mentioned, I'm a freelancer, so I'm not like employed directly by ESPN or anything. But I think, when you do games that are on ESPN 3 or Plus, or whatever division at ESPN, or any network really, it brings a level of credibility. And so you have to, you feel like you have to really raise your game. And it just goes back to the getting better thing. And so, you want to, because people don't necessarily, when they watch a game, again, they may think I work directly for ESPN. So it's just really important that I'm putting out a good product every time I go on air. I might be in a situation. I mean, I've worked games where maybe I've worked this past year. I had a weekend where I worked 4 games in 4 days. And the bottom line is nobody cares about your excuses. Like, they don't care that you got 3 hours of sleep the night before, or that you traveled, you had a travel nightmare getting to this game. They just see what they see when the camera comes on and you're live. And so you have to bring your best effort every time you go on. And that, whether it's a cable station locally that you're working a game for, I just try and bring my best effort, no matter who I'm working for, no matter what I'm working for, every time that I go on air, because to me, it all matters. All those details matter, and your approach, it shouldn't change, if you're working for AZTV or ESPN, like the approach should always be the same.
Uh, well, as I mentioned in the intro, that you're a career coach as well, like, coaching entrepreneurs and businesses for on camera, said work. Yeah, if you want to talk about that, Kelly just, recently started that, I think back in the summer, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had always done a tiny bit of a little bit of coaching here and there, broadcasters on the side, or would have people reach out for feedback, and I'd give them some pretty direct feedback. And I started noticing in the beginning of the pandemic that a lot of things was obviously moving to video with Zoom. A lot of people were on Zoom calls, Zoom
Yeah.
meetings, and then I just started really researching where video is going on the internet. And by 2023, they're projecting that 87% of the content consumed on the internet is going to be video content. And so I saw this need, specifically with entrepreneurs and businesses, that there's a lot of people that are terrified to go on camera and they don't know what type of video content they should be doing. That's obviously an area I have a big area of expertise. That's pretty much what I've done my entire career, is go on camera. And so I think, I started that business just so I could coach people through that. And so what's been fun is it's sort of, it's like a way of giving back and sharing my knowledge that I have, and then watching these people transform in front of my eyes too, because I coach some people that have never been on camera in their life. And then I coach other business owners or entrepreneurs that maybe they've been doing video for 5 years, and it's just fine tuning stuff and tweaking, their approach, or tweaking their bad habits and eliminating their bad habits. So that part's been really fun, is just seeing the transformation of people that, for them, it's not the norm to go on camera, and it's not the norm to be putting out video content. But the reality is that, especially 5 years from now, it's going to be necessary. Like, if you don't want to get left behind, everything, even way outside of our industry, everything is moving to video. People are, because of this thing, people are consuming video content all the time on their phones.
Yeah, no, it's true. My final question, I wanted to end with family. I always like doing that. You said, married. I wanted to talk, you said your parents, I think you have 2 siblings. Can you talk about how much, they have meant to you, said along this journey, said, as a sports, broadcast journalist, Kelly?
They've been huge. They're my everything. I don't have kids, but I have a 12-year-old chocolate lab. But I come from a really close, tight-knit family. And when we moved to Arizona, my dad has 7 brothers and sisters, and 6 of them live out in the Phoenix area. So I can remember growing up, with the Phoenix Suns games, it was like all of us, we'd have family get-togethers every weekend or every other weekend. So even my extended family is like my really close, tight-knit family. And they've just been huge through this whole career, because, like I said, there's a lot of sacrifices I had to make as far as missing holidays. And I know that's not fun as a parent. Like, I know my mom and dad obviously would have liked to see me on some of those holidays, but I think it makes you really appreciate the time you have together even more, so that when I am out there visiting them several times a year, when they're coming to visit me in Florida, I'm really, really present. And, just really appreciating what I have with my family, because they've been some of my biggest cheerleaders and biggest supporters. And that's not to say that, like, I remember that year I was freelancing in Phoenix, just trying to get that first job. I was living in my parents' basement at the time, and I was making money, so I was supporting myself. But I remember my dad and I would have monthly conversations. Maybe you should just take a job in news, so that you can get your foot in the door. And I'd say, Dad, no, I'm going to hold out. I'm going to get a job in sports. Like, it's going to happen. And we go back and forth on it. And there was nobody that was more proud when I did finally get that first sports job than my dad. I mean, he was like bragging to all his friends. But they've been there through all the ups and downs, because there's certainly plenty of challenges and adversity you face in this industry too. So they're just a huge part of my life, and my success, and the struggles that I've had too, but they're always there to support me.
Just entered my mind is that you've been able to experience all different parts of this country. I'm sure that's something that you really, cherish the most, or value, because, not a lot of people get to experience that, can you just, talk about that as well, Kelly?
I just think being able to get out of your comfort zone, for me, it looked like moving to all these different places for different job opportunities, whatever that looks like for you. I have a lot of friends that have never left the Phoenix area, and there's no judgment on that. Like, it's to each their own. But for me, I had to really challenge myself, and I like to put myself in uncomfortable situations. And what I found is when I do that, whether it's, moving to these different states, or whether it's, working a really challenging game assignment, I'm better for it after the fact. And so now I have these amazing friendships with people I've built in the community of all these different TV markets I've worked in, people that have become really good friends, people that I go visit, maybe I go take a vacation and I go see them in some of these different states that I lived in. And it just really opened my eyes to how many beautiful parts of this country there are. It's so diverse as far as just the makeup, not only scenery wise, but just the people and their backgrounds. And I just love being around people and hearing their stories. And I think the more open-minded we can be, and the more, the more shared experiences we can have, and just, seeing what's out there. I think it just transforms how you live your life, because when you're in this sort of bubble world, and, I was largely when you're a college athlete, you're sort of in a bubble world. But I remember when I did that fellowship in New York City that summer into my senior year, it was eye-opening, because I was living in Greenwich Village, and New York City is this huge melting pot, and it opened my eyes to all these experiences to the world, and like, okay, there's a lot more out there than just being a student athlete.
It's true. All right, Kelly, is there anything I've left out? The floor is yours.
I don't think so, Sunil. You've been really, really thorough. I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so glad we've been able to connect through an SMA, and I look forward to continuing to get to know you better. And thank you for what you're doing in putting people's stories out there. And just want to encourage everybody out there. I know we're in a really weird time right now with COVID, and there's so many unknowns with our industry, but I'm just a big proponent in always having a positive attitude and learning and trying to get better each day, whatever that looks like to each of you individually. But I think, having that positive mindset and hope right now is so important. And, we're, at some point this is going to end, and we'll be better for it. But I think it just, really be grateful for the jobs we do have and what we get to do in our industry, because it's such a unique industry that we work in, and we're really lucky to be able to tell people stories and to cover sports for a living. Like, there's a lot worse things we could be doing.
Oh, I know. I every time receive a press credential and I look down and I'm sure collected a number of them. When you look down and you say, wow, like, it's almost like, it's my golden ticket, it's like, you look at it, you're just, again, very blessed and thankful to have, again, the opportunity, like, to go and cover an event and have that access. You don't have to pay for a ticket, you get in for free, and you get to, be there for several hours or whatever it is, and then, cover a game and be able to, write about it as well. There's no better feeling.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I as I mentioned before we started, all of my fall sports got pushed to the spring because of COVID, but my first scheduled basketball game is November 25th. And I don't know what emotions I'm going to be feeling on that. I may cry like tears of joy just because, it's been sort of taken away for so long, at least the live game aspect of it, that I think I'm a person that tries to live in the present anyway, but I think I'm going to be that so much more grounded in just the gratefulness of getting to just do a game.
That's true. All right, Kelly, a true honor and privilege. Thank you so much, and wishing you continued success.
Thank you, Sunil.